Hey guys, welcome back to more relationship family drama stories. In this video, OP became a millionaire and did not give a single penny to his toxic, abusive parents. Let's dive right into the story to find out what happened. It's funny how you think your life is gonna end up a certain way and it turns out that it ends up the complete opposite. Growing up in Pakistan, my home was a house of horrors. My father was an abusive alcoholic who was never happy with anything. My mom, on the other hand, was an expert in emotional manipulation. Their emotional abuse and anger outbursts were worse than any physical blow. My mom was slightly better than my dad, but she was also a huge enabler, and together they created a nightmare that I could not wait to escape. My brother, the golden child, lived in a different world, however. He was the star of their show, brilliant in their eyes, flawless in every way. He could do no wrong while I could do no right. His achievements were celebrated while my existence was barely acknowledged. It was not just neglect, it was a constant reminder that I was less worthy and less deserving. The beatings, the belittlement, and the constant comparisons to him were the worst parts of my formative years. As a child, I genuinely thought I was going to be living under my brother's shadow for my entire life, and I thought that even on the rare chance that I was successful and did something better than my brother, that I would still get swept under the rug while they celebrated my brother for doing the bare minimum. And yes, I did have resentment towards my brother. I understood it was not his fault, but that still did not stop the feelings from happening. I mean, I could literally follow him, do the exact same things as him, and my parents would not care or find a way to berate me for it. When I was 16, I had enough. I scored first place and a perfect grade on a computer project in school. I always loved tinkering with electronics and figuring things out. In the back of my mind, I knew that there was no point in bringing home the report to my parents, but my excitement got the best of me. I can remember that day as clearly as ever. My dad's exact words were, "So what? Your brother has been bringing home good grades forever. Do you think you are special?" I ran away from home with nothing but the clothes on my back and a fierce determination to make something of myself. It was a harsh world out there, far harsher than I had imagined, especially here in Pakistan. I slept in shelters, did odd jobs, and faced countless rejections, but every setback was a reminder of why I had to keep going. The turning point came when I landed a job with a small startup. The work was grueling, the pay was meager, but it was a start. I saved every penny, learned everything I could, and eventually started my own business. My parents never came looking for me, but every now and then I would run into someone they knew, so I assumed they knew I was out on the streets. It was not easy, but I kept pushing through and made things happen. By the time I was 18, I was able to afford an apartment with a friend I had met working at a local computer repair shop. It was bittersweet really. I had finally felt like I was beginning to experience happiness in my life, but sometimes I could not help but wish I had different parents. My roommate Ahmed and his family were mostly supportive of him and his endeavors. I was happy for him, but again, I just couldn't help but wonder how different my life would have looked if I had parents that cared about me. A few years went by and I was working harder than ever. I had made it into a computer science program and even landed a neat internship that gave me tons of experience. In the years I was in school, I never heard from my parents. As a matter of fact, it wouldn't be until my late 20s that I heard from my parents again. That would also be the last time. By the time I was 27, I had created an abundance of wealth for myself, and I don't mean just money. I excelled at my classes and finished my degree program 2 years early, had my own luxury apartment and was now in the final phases and launching my computer science company. Yeah, that's right, my own company. I was going to be my own boss and create something for myself. At age 28, my company was excelling way beyond projected numbers. My old roommate Ahmed became my business partner and we were doing great things together. Life was truly amazing and it was turning out the complete opposite of how I thought it would go. Well, except one day when I was in my office and my assistant had told me that I had an important call waiting for me. While I was usually getting a lot of calls at this point, I was usually aware of them in advance if they were important for the company. Regardless, I picked up the voice and you can imagine my shock when I heard a voice that I thought I would not hear ever again. It was my mom. "Hello, dear son. Why are you calling me?" I immediately spat out. "And how did you even get this number?" "Well, I see that you've been making quite the name for yourself. You're easier to find these days. So what do you want?" "Well, I wanted to reconnect with you. You know, we treated you terribly and your father and I are getting old now. He is very sick and I would hate for him to leave this earth without getting closure from you." I could not believe the words that I was hearing. I did not owe them anything, especially closure. "So you're only contacting me because my dad is sick and you think I owe him something?" "I don't owe you anything. anything. Go bother your other son. You know the perfect one. My mother sighed on the other line. We tried talking to your brother, but he is busy working on a project. Plus, we never thought that you would turn out this successful. From what we know, you could more than well pay your father's medical bills and still be okay. I was fuming, so that is what this was all about. There was no way in hell I was paying anyone's bills, especially his. Besides, what would realistically happen if I did? I would pay them and then they would stop all communications once again until they needed something else. Yeah, no thanks, I knew how this would work. I'm not paying crap for you and our dad. You were hardly parents anyway. Go bother someone else and don't even try and contact me again or I will take legal action to prevent you from doing so, I said, hanging up the phone. I shouldn't have been surprised really. But after not hearing from them since I was 16, I was extremely shocked and pissed off. How could they even have the guts to call me and ask me for money? After that I never heard from them again. However, it did get me curious about my brother and I asked Ahmed to help me find him. Luckily Ahmed was good at this and found him rather quickly and I was able to contact him. So basically my brother had told me that he had been in and out of contact with them for years, but that in the last several years he had been out of contact with them. Apparently after I ran away, they used him as the scapegoat and became extremely controlling and verbally abusive towards him. He said it was like he had a completely different pair of parents and that he was so shocked. He admitted that now he could only imagine what it felt like for me because I had to deal with it for all our childhood. Luckily, my brother was able to cut contact with them as well and make something of himself, although I never doubted that he would. Isn't it funny how life works out? Edit, update to the story. Thank you for all the comments. I appreciate your interest and I understand why you might wonder about my decision not to help my parents. It's a complex situation and I would like to elaborate a bit more on how bad my childhood was since I already briefly mentioned it in the beginning. You are right, my father did pass away about a year after that phone call. My mother contacted me again to inform me, but I did not attend the funeral. Some might see this as cruel, but I need to emphasize just how toxic and abusive my childhood was. As mentioned prior, growing up, the emotional abuse was relentless. My father would often come home drunk and go on tirades, calling me worthless and stupid. He would compare me to my brother, saying things like, "Why can't you be more like him? He's gonna amount to something unlike you." My mother, instead of protecting me, would join in or stand by silently. There were days when I was not allowed to eat because I had disappointed them somehow. They would lock me in my room for hours, sometimes overnight, as punishment for minor infractions. I remember once getting locked out of the house in the middle of winter because I got a B on a test. The constant belittlement and emotional manipulation left deep scars in me. I developed severe anxiety and depression, which I've had to work hard to overcome. Even now, years later, I sometimes struggle with self-doubt and feelings of worthlessness that stem from those years of abuse. When my mother called asking for money, it felt like another manipulation tactic. They had never shown any remorse for their actions, never apologized, and only reached out when they needed something from me. Helping them financially would have meant reopening those old wounds and potentially submitting myself to more emotional abuse. I know some might argue that I should have been the bigger person, but I've learned that sometimes maintaining boundaries is crucial for one's mental health and well-being. My success came from years of hard work and healing. I was not willing to jeopardize that. I don't celebrate my father's death, but I also don't mourn it. What I mourn is the loving family I never had. I've worked hard in therapy to process these feelings and move forward with my life. Today I focus on being the best version of myself and surrounding myself with positive relationships. I've even reconciled with my brother and we are slowly building the supportive sibling relationship we were denied as children. I hope this additional context helps explain my perspective. It was not an easy decision, but it was the right one for me. And here, Ripe Stars, let me know what you think about the story in the comments, and what would you have done if you were in OP's shoes? Would you have helped your parents or not? Let me know in the comments. Either way, the next one is a petty revenge story from r/Ripe Stories posted by user JendrixC. And by the way, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel because we're getting closer and closer to 130,000 subscribers, which I would love to reach. Hey everyone, just want to share this funny story with you that happened many years ago. Our neighbor, let's call him Peter for this story, thought that it would be a really great idea to get himself a few chickens as well as a rooster to keep them company. Now, I don't need to tell you that roosters tend to be very loud, especially in the morning or when they just feel like it. I usually had no problem with the rooster since he usually started crowing when I needed to get up for school anyway, and besides that, I lived on the other side of the house so the noise was not that loud. But while I was shielded from that noise, my parents were not that lucky. My father, let's call him Frank, used to work night shifts and then he would constantly apparently struggled to fall asleep when coming home in the morning. At first he thought of just letting it slide, since we were living in a small village and farms with animals are really common here, which is also why we would not have luck with police or judges in this case. After about 2 weeks, the lack of sleep took its toll and Frank started to get angrier and would get mad about small things in the house, like a door getting slammed by a gust of wind or him dropping something, but he would always apologize for it and blamed it on Peter's rooster. Because Frank didn't want this to continue, he's usually a really calm person, he went over to Peter and told him that he couldn't sleep because of the constant noise. But Peter just brushed it off and Frank to just deal with it, cause it's in the rooster's nature to crow. Frank returned with an angry face when my older brother, 19 at that time, came up with a funny plan to get rid of the rooster without needing to break any laws. So then the next morning, Frank came home from night shift to be greeted yet again by the crowing of the rooster. So he just went over instantly to Peter and rang his doorbell. After a solid 10 minutes, Peter opened the door to ask what my father wanted this early. It was about 6:30 at that time, to which Frank just replied that Peter's rooster is crowing. Peter, visibly confused, just answered this was no reason to wake him up and slammed the door shut, and my father went to bed. This continued for about a week, and would you look at that, Peter decided to sell the rooster again but kept the chickens, but they were never the problem in the first place. And the next one is titled Racist Karen, posted by user Amarok26 on r/ripe stories. And by the way, Ripe Stars, if you have any interesting stories of your own to share, then please head over to r/ripe stories on Reddit. Just type that into Google and you will be able to post your own story there on Reddit, and if it is a good longer story, then I will read it in a video. Also, pro tip by the way, in order to register for Reddit, you don't even need to have a valid email address. You can type any random email that comes to your mind and you can still post a story, at least in theory. So anyway, a bit of information first. I was working in a nursing home kitchen. It was a day that I was left in charge, but I was going to be short-staffed for the dinner meal service. Also, this particular day, the activities department, staff that are hired to be both companions and entertainment providers for the residents, had baked cookies for an activity with the residents. I had nothing to do with the activity, so I didn't know where the cookies came from or where the leftover cookies were. I was busy making sure dinner would be ready on time. I should also point out that I'm a very pale Caucasian. It's important later. Now, the daytime staff had all left for the day, and I was alone in the kitchen, running this way and that as usual to ensure any and all food for the meal was ready on time. A member of the nursing staff I'd never seen before steps into the doorway. I will call her Karen. It is not exactly subtle that I'm busy, but she calls out to me. I stop what I'm doing to go see what she needs and she says, "I saw activities giving out cookies earlier. They looked really good. I want some." I said, "I'm sorry, this kitchen had nothing to do with that activity. The activity aides made and gave out those cookies, so I don't know where any leftover cookies might be. You will have to ask them." Thinking I've told her that I couldn't help her here, I turned to return to my work. She raised her voice a bit and said, "But it's food. It had to have come from here. I want some of those cookies." As I said before, I know nothing about any cookies today. I need to finish making dinner or our residents will be fed late. Good luck with finding the cookies though. And I returned to work. I ignored that she continued standing there for several minutes. As I approached near her again, carrying most of the dinner foods piping hot in metal trays and began to place them in the serving table, Karen angrily yells at me saying, "Just because I'm black doesn't mean you can be a witch to me." I was tired of this entitled behavior, especially since I really couldn't help her with what she wanted. I turned to her and said, "Unless what you want has something to do with turkey, place the pan of turkey in serving table, spinach, place pan of spinach in serving table, or rice, place pan of rice into serving table, I just cannot help you. I suggest you go bother someone with more time to talk to you about your cookies." Karen huffs a, "Well, I never," and leaves. Dinner started on time and there were 5 units and a dining room to serve. I'd been told by my boss that if a resident did not like the food they originally ordered, they had to wait until all the residents had gotten food before we made an alternate meal for them. After serving 1 unit, the phone rings. It is Karen. One of the residents didn't like the turkey and wants a roast beef sandwich instead. I answer, "I will send or bring it down myself as soon as I can." We both hang up and I continue serving. The 5 units now had their food almost 45 minutes later, and it was time to serve the dining room of about 20 people. We were running late by almost 10 minutes, but it wasn't bad for being short-staffed. Well, Karen had apparently walked through the dining room as she burst through the kitchen and dining room doors screaming, "Where's the sandwich? I ordered it 2 hours ago." It was not 2 hours ago, it was 45 minutes ago. I have not forgotten them, I'm doing what I was told. She stormed over without a hairnet, which caused me to quickly cover the food to prevent contamination. She got right up in my face and said, said, "I don't know what your problem is with black people, but if I don't get that sandwich in the next 5 minutes, I'm making sure you are fired." She returned to the dining room door and while holding the door open, turned back yelling, "Do you understand me?" I'd had it. I yelled back, "I don't care about your skin color or if you think your resident is Jesus Christ of the cross. My job is to get food to these residents and then go back and make different meals. There are 20 people in that room behind you that have not gotten food yet. Your resident refused his food. They have to wait. Now get out of my kitchen. The sandwich will be delivered when it's ready." I had not been thinking about the door being open when I started yelling and was startled when a round of applause came from behind Karen. Karen stood shocked for several moments before storming off. The sandwich was made and delivered 10 minutes later. Karen wrote me up claiming I was refusing to feed one of our residents. My manager defended me, saying I did exactly what he had told me to do. I only saw Karen about a dozen times after that. Whenever she saw me, she would make comments like, "Are you being a witch today?" My response would always be, "That depends. Are you going to whine about cookie and spout hateful lies?" Also a few times there would be leftover desserts that were indeed cookies. The super cheap lemon flavored ones that taste like they were made with sawdust. I would drop these leftover cookies off at whatever unit she was working and told the nursing staff at the desk that these were for Karen and to make sure that she got them. And the next one is titled Karen's Hot Tub. So the previous owner of my house, H, called a few days ago interested in buying the hot tub I have on my lower deck. I bought the house from him, including the hot tub and shed. When he sold the property to me, he was in an on and off again relationship with his now wife Karen. I told him in the first phone call I would want time to think on it and do some research. I don't use the hot tub, haven't in a year I have lived here, so I was open to selling it. Through his own admission, it was worth $12,000 brand new 2 years ago and has seen very light use. No cosmetic damage besides being dirty, so while playing phone tag with him over the next couple days, I had the number of around 8 to 9K to be expected for it. Out of the blue 2 days ago, Karen calls me and begins to chat with me about the hot tub. I start with asking how they plan to move it, and she says they will hire professional movers, and then I asked what they were thinking as far as pricing goes. She goes into this long monologue about how they have put in a lot of sweat equity into the home, they were the ones to buy it and set it up, yada yada yada, and then tells me they are looking around 3K for it. Taken aback a bit, I told her I would have to think on it and that further negotiations would probably be coming. She sounded very annoyed and rushed the entire time on the phone with me, like she was working and I was inconveniencing her even though she called me. Fast forward to today. Obviously, I decided to not go through with the sale, and to be gentle about it, I called H and told him that I didn't want to sell it because it's part of the home's value. Partially true, but I didn't want to come out and say that they, or rather Karen, tried to offensively lowball me. H was very understanding and asked me, sounding almost scared, to please text Karen and let her know before H got home. Weird request at the time, but okay, sure. Then I come to find out I am sure he knew what her reaction would be and didn't want to take the full heat for it. I texted her explaining what I told H and she texted me back, "We left you a super clean place. It had mold and had a lot of sweat equity invested. A couch and a shed a company put in. You personally did not make those improvements. I made others. Yet you will capitalize on those improvements. That's how real estate works." She then went on to call me as greedy as the market and that asking for the tub was not unreasonable because it was barely used at all. And also best wishes on getting what you think you deserve out of our improvements. I have yet to send a reply because I have no idea what to say to her. Edit: the home sale process was different than a typical closing. I live in a park model on leased land. I own the home and all improvements on the land. I bought directly from the previous owner, with due diligence of course, including the title and a bill of sale and supporting documents as to what went with the property. And wouldn't you guess, that includes the hot tub. Edit number 2, a couple of people have mentioned depreciation on the hot tub and that in the majority of cases it does not add much value to the home, but for me selling or not selling the hot tub was not that deep. I did not have to sell it or really have a large desire to do so, so if I did not feel it's personally worth it to me, I was not gonna sell it. In most cases, yeah, what I wanted might have been a lot for it. But they had other options than buying mine. They live 45 minutes closer to the store they bought mine from and would still be paying significantly less than getting a new one and setting it up. In my neighborhood, a lot of the homes are bought as vacation rentals, Airbnbs and retirement spots. The vast majority of them, to me, keeping the hot tub and selling it with the house is worth more than 3K and having to deal with Karen and H. This is not my first experience with them being entitled, just the most pronounced. And yeah, ripe stars, I gotta say, I'm on OP's side here. I would definitely not want to have to deal with K and H. I would probably even sell my house or hot tub or whatever at a loss to not have to deal with a person like Karen and H. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.